Welcome to Chasing Rings Overtime. These fast break episodes are an extension of the main show, delivering quick-hitting takes, bold opinions, and analysis on the biggest stories and topics across sports. While we remain rooted in football year-round, Overtime expands our lens to cover everything happening across the sports world. We will return for a second season of full-length episodes in July as we ramp up for complete NCAA football and NFL coverage in preparation for the 2026 seasons. Until then, let's go. This is Chasing Rings Overtime. Welcome to another episode of Chasing Rings Overtime. G, big dude, how you feeling tonight?
How we all?
What's going on?
What's going on?
Yeah, not too much. Same old, same old. We're going to hop right into some NBA action. The third game of the finals took place in Madison Square Garden the other night, and Spurs obviously coming out victorious, but game three wasn't a whole lot different really from the first two games in terms of how it played out. Spurs got off to fast starts. They've been getting off to fast starts in every game in the series so far. That's one of the concerns with the Knicks right now, why they're coming out starting so slowly in this series. Spurs built double-digit leads in all the games. Knicks eventually caught them. Seemed like they had control, except for game three was a little bit different. The Knicks seemingly had control at halftime, but in the second half, it's a different Spurs team that we'd seen the entire series. They kind of regained control, even though the game stayed close. They were pretty much in control, anywhere from 3 to 7, 8 points at different times. A little shaky towards the end, as all the games have been, but this time the baby Spurs pulled it out. They've made this series interesting now because I think a lot of us, including myself, were talking sweep after I predicted the Spurs to win this thing. Of course, it looked like the Knicks were going to sweep. So I was very happy, pleasantly surprised, not that I have a rooting interest, but to see the Spurs fight back, being such a young team, to win on the road, hostile environment. We've seen everything that's been taking place in the city, since we knew the Knicks were going to be in the finals, but after going up 2-0, it's been crazy. Big dude, what do you think made the difference in the Spurs being able to actually finish on Monday night, something they weren't able to do the first two games of the series, to hopefully make this an interesting NBA Finals now?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, brutal physicality. I mean, they played like grown men. That was grown men basketball, I think, by the Spurs. And obviously it was questionable about liberties they took with hardcore grown men basketball. I mean, it was back to the 80s, especially when Wembanyama pushes down Brunson all the way to the floor. He just suns him all the way to the floor, which is, hey, listen, they felt they had nothing to lose. And I think starting off and getting Wemby in the post early, Wemby only took four three-pointers, which I think was healthy, and him going 11 for 18 otherwise is about what you want. He did hit one, a couple, but I think it was him playing, him wearing down, especially Robinson. When Robinson came off the bench for New York, Robinson was able to hang with him some, but not a whole lot. If you take Robinson off the bench, he's not a real good perimeter guy, where Cat is. So Cat was down. I think the other thing was a number of different folks in different venues were talking about it. They didn't think this was Brunson's best game. I thought that he was a little bit more careless than I remember. Even 5 turnovers for him is big, So I think that they didn't panic. People like Vassell, I think, really good. And, of course, Harper just keeps getting better each and every game. The guy is devastating. Stefan Castle, very athletic. He just got to be under control some more. But they just had the energy, and the Knicks didn't have the energy. I think that middle part of the third quarter, they weren't able to do anything with the lead. So I think the physicality, and I think that the disciplined play of the younger team, I think they outplayed the Knicks from a standpoint of discipline. And De'Aaron Fox also played a much better game and had much more of an impact. He was moving more like himself. So that gave them another option, I felt, this time. Even though I thought his minutes should be limited. Fox played 36 minutes, and he was able to suck it up for a good 36. So I just think that they were able to replace some of the areas that they weren't able to do so in the first two games. Now it's 2-1. Every win has been on the road for both teams. So it ought to be interesting.
Yeah, for real. G, I know you didn't necessarily get to see all of it, but I know you've certainly taken in the aftermath a little bit since that game. What's your perspective on it?
Yeah, believe it or not, I went back and I watched the games, and between game one and game three, I think the Spurs had figured something out about New York. I know in the first game when Wemby was in, New York run. When Wemby was out, I think it's number 7. I can't remember his name in San Antonio. They would run, but then when Wemby came back in, San Antonio would slow it down, and I noticed that. But it was more of that in game two. And game two, as you know, was a lot closer. But I think that what they were doing was moving. And, the offense, you could tell, runs through Wemby, but I think it became a Wemby in position type of control game. Because you notice sometimes they have him hover, the players hover out at the 3. Other times it was hover down, on the post. And they were just really floating him in and out. And then, of course, his team was operating around that. And that really seemed to work well. Because game two was that was probably of the games I watched, that was the funnest game, I think. I thought it was much more competitive. And honestly, what's your boy, number 7? I mean, I think number 5 for the Spurs. I can't remember his name. He looked at the very end. He looked Wemby dead in the face. Wemby was like getting ready to pass it to him, and he turns around and runs. Like, dude, what are you doing? He just eyed you up for the pass. And so, you know what? Sometimes you can blow a game with one bonehead play, but some people don't believe one bonehead play makes a difference. You shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. I'm like, yeah, but two things can be same. And so let me get to game 3. I think San Antonio figured it out. If you go back and look at it, even if you just look at the highlights, the first 3 quarters are very competitive, and through all 3 games so far, I love that the refs are allowing them to play. And so you saw that those first 3 quarters, and Big Dude, I think you touched on something I was going to touch on. I think New York is getting tired because they got really sloppy in the fourth quarter. If you go back and look at the highlights, for example, you can see it. They really got sloppy. And maybe those last 7 minutes or so, there were a couple of times I thought that they were playing for their lives almost and just making some bonehead, really high emotion type plays versus playing within themselves. And then San Antonio was making me think of the San Antonio of old, man. They just kind of fundamental New York to death in that fourth quarter if you go back and look at it. So I think the Spurs have figured New York out.
Yeah, you both touch on a lot that I agree with, and I want to start with that last piece that you mentioned, G. That's how I felt when the game was over. That's how I left feeling that, I think the Spurs figured something out here. First and foremost, going back to what you said, Big Dude, the physicality. Don't bow down, you have a couple of dogs out there. We know Castle's not backing down from anybody. Dylan Harper's not backing down. And I think people look at Wemby and think he might back down because of his frame, but he showed he has a little dog in him the other night. And, he's getting a little frustrated too, because, one of the complaints that Coach Brown had for the Knicks was, the foul disparity. And I'm sorry, Wemby's been getting beat up the entire playoffs, and the Knicks have been no different. The holding, the bumping, and I have no problem with that. It goes both ways. But one of the issues I really want to point out that Mike Brown was arguing is how the Knicks really weren't getting the same number of fouls called. But look at the style of games that they played. New York took a lot of jump shots in game 3. And when you're taking jump shots, where are the fouls coming from?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? San Antonio was being aggressive, going to the basket, getting into the paint. The only time that New York was engaged in situations that have foul possibilities was typically on rebounds and loose balls. Other than that, when you're taking, they took a lot of 3-pointers, and that kept them in the game. Like you said, G, like it was almost kind of in that fourth quarter, especially coming down the stretch. Some of those shots were just like survival shots, and they were going in still, luckily. But they could have easily lost by double figures, but somehow they were hitting shots, and they were getting some opportune second chances. There was a lot of that I felt during the game where San Antonio would be this close to kind of stretching that lead to where it would be insurmountable, but the Knicks would find a way. But I definitely want to touch on that. So I'm not trying to hear the foul situation.
They were all playing pretty hard, man.
Yeah. And I feel like it was both ways. There was plays that I saw that I felt like, the Spurs were driving to the basket, and especially a lot involving Wemby, where they let some calls go. So I'm not really trying to hear that. We're midway through an NBA final. Suck it up, man. And if you think that's the issue, then you test that officiating in the next game. You get physical back and see how they're going to call it. Each game's officiated differently, so we'll see what happens. But I want to talk about Brunson for a little bit because, I know I had texted you guys last night about it. If the way he's been playing, it's so easy to defend. And San Antonio finally figured it out last night. I wish they would back up even a little bit more, whoever's guarding him, because he's going to dribble out 3/4 of the shot clock. And I'm totally fine with that, because if I'm going to stay in front of you, then that means you guys are going to have a rush shot. And if those shots go in, if you could beat us 7 games in a 7-game series and you keep making those shots, more power to you. But they got to move that ball around more, and they have to go through Cat, like you said, big dude. I think we look at the first 2 games, Cat had 18, 12, and 4. That was, game 1. Game 2, he had 21, 13, and 4. And game 3 last night, he had 11, 6, and 1. And he's just not touching the ball enough. Now, part of that
should really be going through him, man. Because
absolutely should go through him.
He could bully Wemby. I don't know if y'all peeped that, but when he was really on the post with Wemby can't do much with him.
He said it. He mouthed it in game 2. He said, "You can't mess with me, man. I keep it PG." That's not what he really said. But it was a mismatch, because the problem that Wemby has trying to guard him and play offense against him is that strength. And if you notice, Wemby wasn't tired last night like he appeared to have been in the recent games. And a lot of that is the result of not having to deal with Cat. Now, they played defense differently.
They pulled him out.
Yep. They played defense much differently. They kind of had Wemby still cheating over into the paint, and they were willing to give Hart, hit a lot of 3-point shots. He was like, you can have that. And that's kind of how I feel that they can win. If Brunson wants to dribble around for 17 to 24 seconds and then kick it to one of these guys, beat me. Go ahead. If they think Hart's going to beat me or Bridges, go for it. Go for it. I don't think they're going to beat them with those two. And Brunson, I've seen different stats. Looks like he's shooting like maybe high 30% for the series. Not
for
good. I think I mentioned
just in general.
In general. And it seems like he's putting up numbers, but last night, for example, 32 points on 35 shots. Should have had 50 points last night on 35 shots.
Most of that came from threes, didn't it?
He probably took some questionable threes. But when he would drive to the basket and not play around with the ball, he was getting to the free throw line when he would drive it. So the Knicks got outside of themselves. I did see a little weariness. We'll see how that plays out Wednesday night. I think San Antonio has an X factor that they've yet to utilize yet. And I'll ask you guys what you think about moving forward. What you think this series is going to look like. Carter Bryant, the young kid from Arizona who coach had a talk to in the OKC game, kind of trying to keep him going. I think he's an X factor for San Antonio. He's only played 4 minutes in game 1, 3 minutes in game 2, and 1 minute the other night. And, he hit a key three in the first game, hasn't really contributed much, but he's a defensive specialist. And that's another body that they've yet to throw at Brunson. Now, one of the problems they have is, what's my guy's name? Anunoby. I always say his name wrong. Big dude can nail it. Anunoby. They should have went through him. Their offense should have went through him last night. He was unstoppable because he was knocking down his threes. And if they came out too hard on the threes, he was able to get to the basket and either finish or go to the free throw line. So I think that, I don't know what happened with the Knicks strategy, but I think a lot was Brunson handling the ball way, way too much and Cat not touching it enough.
I didn't get the passing that was happening in game 1 and 2 for the Knicks when they were pushing the ball definitely wasn't there as consistently in game 3.
No.
Yeah, San Antonio's defense was just incredible pretty much all night. I mean, they were switching nicely. Knicks got a few open shots, but for the most part, everything was contested. And I think a team is willing to die with that. If I can be in front of these shooters the entire time, I'll take my chances. But sometimes it just seemed like the Knicks did not miss. I'm sorry. There's no way that they're going to keep hitting these shots. And at the end, and I think that's what you were touching on, G, some of those shots stopped falling. And that's how the Spurs kind of built that buffer. But legs, you can't keep taking jump shots the entire series. Now, that would have worked in their favor had they won the other night. Now, we have potentially tired legs from all the jump shots. I almost want to say I think Brunson might be a little banged up. Of course, he got hurt in, I think it was the first game. I can't remember if it was the first or second game when he went to the locker room. But I think that he's feeling that playoff burn now. I think he's probably a little bit banged up, and we'll see how that works as the strong, tough young guards on San Antonio keep the pressure up. But how do you guys see the rest of this series playing out? G, I'll start with you. You think the Spurs can tie this game up going back to San Antonio?
Yeah, I think they can. I think that this was the corner that the Spurs, just turned. The first game was out of hand. Second game basically won on a bonehead play. In the third game, Seattle won. So I think Seattle has figured it out. And they're going to, and this is going to be it's really going to be a coaching series the rest of the way here. So I believe San Antonio, as long as they can continue to dictate like they did in game 2 to a degree and much of game 3, it'll be San Antonio. But I was looking at bench play, and not that big of a difference, but I think Dylan Harper with his 13 points was probably not going to happen a whole lot, But so I think Knicks, if they go to like a 7-man rotation and keep the speed up, then I think Knicks can pull it off. But I think they need to go 7 deep in order to do that and just trust it. And when Wemby sits down, because if y'all peeped it, he takes his breaks. And I think when that happens, they need to just bum rush San Antonio. Otherwise, San Antonio is going to fundamental them to death.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about the Knicks bench. Going into this series, the Knicks definitely had the better bench. And I think that's what's gotten them to this point. Their bench has just been better than everybody else's in the league. You also touched on game 2. And this could be a very different series right now because, Wemby doesn't make that turnover. And I like that you mentioned, one play certainly doesn't define the game. But, man, that whole end of that game changes when minimally it should have been overtime. The Knicks shouldn't have even had a chance to win that game. Worst case scenario should have been an overtime for the Spurs. This series could easily be 2-1 going into Wednesday night, which would be a whole different type of feeling in the air in New York. But just want to throw that out there and kind of leave that there. That, have the Spurs perhaps dominated this series. Double-digit leads every game, gave away game 2, pretty much led throughout the other night. Have our eyes been deceiving us because the Knicks happened to win the first two? Big dude, what do you think going into Game 4, and then what you think the Spurs or Knicks can do with the rest of this series here?
Well, I mean, I think with the Knicks, I think that you could match Spurs physical for physical, but they almost have to be crafty and use somebody at the bench. I think maybe at the point where you start to at least look at Cat at least as like a point forward, more so than as center. And
That's
he'd be the distributor. He'd be the distributor, and this has been talked about as well. And I think that's
passer. Excellent passer too.
And Brunson is an excellent finisher, and I think that's what Brunson does. I think that'll create some other things. I think if they can get some work out of Robinson, coming off the bench, Robinson is a good player. The hard part about Robinson is, can he keep up with that fast-paced game? Because San Antonio is fast and they're young, and he's got the brutal strength to him, but they're not going to play him like that and allow a lot of opportunities if somehow they can get some use out of him. And of course, coming off the bench between Clarkson, Shamet, and Alvarado, I think is going to be important to be able to get Brunson the rest that he's going to need. Like you say, Guru, he is, he's down some Brunson. Brunson needs his rest. He got in foul trouble. Brunson has to be a lot smarter than the fouls that he has. So those minutes that Brunson gets have to be scheduled minutes, not minutes that he has to get to keep out of foul trouble. I think that was the other thing, that it's a different game when he's not in there and they have to make the adjustments on the fly. I think the Knicks ought to plan, using all those other folks. And I think they were to a certain extent, but I think that they've got to try to match them with their speed and go to the hole more and use Cat. Now with the Spurs, I think they could play pretty much the same. I really think, though, the key for the Spurs is going to be Stephon Castle. Now you mentioned in reference that turnover, Guru, that Wemby threw in an outlet. Now maybe I guess basketball has changed. I mean, the one thing that I thought should have happened, and maybe that doesn't happen anymore, as the guard comes back and gets the ball from the big man.
Yep.
That's what I thought should have happened. I mean,
you at least make yourself available.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, so he was in a lane to run, and it was important that they kept that possession. And that's why the guy gets it, because he's going to run something, either Castle, and I don't know that I think you even, I don't know if Harper was even in the game, but between him and between Harper and between Val, one of those guys have got it. And there's where I think the team is younger. They just want to run, and we know you can beat them up and down the court, but it's that having control. That's where Brunson is much better, having control of that last possession when it's time. And then Brunson has got to get other people involved before he can come and finish it. But I certainly will say, I think that the guards and their maturity of their play will give San Antonio a chance, and I wouldn't hate it if San Antonio tied it up. I think the Knicks. I don't know if I can see the Knicks going down 2-0, because I think the Knicks is a team that's learned, But if they get into this whole thing about fouls, they can forget it. I think the Knicks, though, with their deep benches this time, I think it kind of works to their favor. I think they may slide by. Not that I want them to
bring the ball up sometimes.
He does, and I hate it.
I think that was surprised. That's why Castle probably looked at him and turned around, like, well, maybe he's going to bring it up.
Yeah, but I mean, with the game on the line, dude, they didn't
recognize situation. I think if it was another part of the game, I don't think I would have had a problem with it. But with the last possession, your guards gotta go and set. And someone said that De'Aaron Fox was calling for the ball, but I don't recall. And I didn't watch the replay again to see what the personnel looked like, but they did say that De'Aaron Fox was on the other side calling for the ball, which would have made sense. But Castle looked, he looked right back at him, and I think it was almost like soon as he turned, Wemby released, and Brunson saw it coming. So, and then Wemby, panicked and made the foul that was unnecessary. I think it was they just situationally lost control of the moment. And, young team, that happens, but I think they bounced back nicely. Both of you guys touched on some really good stuff again about the bench. Big dude, what you just said about the bench, all of those guys you named have been contributors. And in fact, when the Knicks came back to kind of take control of the last game at halftime, it was the bench that did it while Brunson was sitting. So,
Right.
they might want to look at that last piece of that second quarter to see what that personnel looked like and what worked. You also mentioned Mitchell Robinson, which I've heard a lot of talking heads bring his name up today. He's got to be your enforcer. If this is how the Spurs are going to play it, he's got to be the guy that comes in, because he probably isn't the guy you're going to look to contribute that much on offense. So if he gets some quick fouls and gets into a little bit of foul trouble trying to set the tone, so be it. So I really love the fact that you brought that up, big dude. So what are our predictions for Game 4, and who do you guys think are going to win the series?
San Antonio for both for me.
What about you, big dude?
Very, very reluctantly and very begrudgingly, New York.
I agree with you, G. I think San Antonio has complete control of this series right now. If they change what they're doing, again, they should be up 2-1. Play like you've been playing. Be poised at the end of the game. Play like you've been playing.
Yeah.
Who would take over the point guard for New York? Because the more y'all talk, and I reflect back, and I'm like, Brunson is a 2. He really is a 2. They just been forced to play the 1. So who on their team right now can truly be a distributor?
I think Hart could do it. Hart doesn't have to have all the shots. One thing about him is he's going to make the shots for the most part he's supposed to make. So I think if you can get Hart to have a good game and get out of all that, because they got him involved with the fisticuffs and the physicality, I think we have to see how good his head is to be able to handle the ball. He has all the skills. He can win some of those one-on-one matchups on some of those guys and perhaps get their guards and their folks in foul trouble, especially with Castle being as aggressive as he is. And he's another one that likes to ask for calls. He's got to tell himself he hasn't been in the league that long, man. I think
he ain't earned that.
Yeah, right. And I like Hart at point guard, to be honest with you. And let's see what Hart can do.
Well, I'm kind of curious about Alvarado.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my only thing with him, I think he could play it. He has for other teams. He's a little bit of a journeyman.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just uncertain the pressure that the Spurs guards put on the opposition's guards would concern me. And I think because of his handle, and I think this is where the Spurs might have him by the tail, Brunson might almost have to be the point guard. But I think you can get around that, and I think we're all in agreement. You can get around that if Cat initiates the offense.
Yeah, I think so.
Which I know it just sounds weird, but in today's NBA game, we got 7-footers taking more 3-pointers than they need to be and never putting their foot in the paint. So, but yeah, that's a great question, G. That's a really good question. I don't know if they have a pure point guard that can give them the minutes they need. Alvarado could give them some minutes for sure.
Yeah.
What is Clarkson? Is Clarkson like a 3? Is Clarkson like a 3, or is he a 2-3?
Yeah, he's like a game. I say he's a tweener, 2-3.
He had a nice game the other night.
Yeah, he's got a pretty good handle. 10 points for him, and that was in 13 minutes. So that goes to show you he's maximizing his game. He's probably as close to them. I don't know what his whole profile is, but he played with a lot of energy. I'll say that's the guy that surprised me, because I thought that Alvarado was going to be the guy, and then. McBride in game 2 hit a shot. But McBride hadn't hit anything all series, and he hits a big 3. So they have, from 1 to 15 on the team, the Knicks can rely on any of those folks at any time. But, I don't know if I would start the game with Alvarado. I certainly would, and that would be my pattern, Alvarado for Hart, and then switch Hart to number 2 when Brunson goes out. You
The
know,
problem is that if the Spurs get this game on
Mhm.
Wednesday night and Brunson continues to be the primary ball handler with the amount of pressure that the Spurs defense is bringing, I don't know what he'd have left by game 6. I really don't. Taking the
Yeah.
number of shots that he's taken, bringing the ball up. I mean, their guards on defense are creating some serious pressure. And I think what's
Mhm.
gotten the Spurs in trouble in those first 2 games is sometimes they've jumped unnecessarily, leaving the middle open or leaving some of the easy shots open. But when Wemby was a little bit more settled and not leaving his area and kind of being able to protect the outside just to put a hand up, but not give that pain up, the guards were doing their thing out in the front of that defense. So the Knicks created a problem for themselves by letting that game get away the other night, in my opinion. I had picked the Spurs before the series began. I felt a little bit better about it after the game the other night. I'm not totally comfortable in it, but I do think momentum is flipped to the Spurs. So we'll see what the Knicks are about, I guess, on Wednesday night. So, all right. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Chasing Rings Overtime. And until next time, remember to like, subscribe, and follow. See ya later.